Let's look at the genres for a second here. For example, in science fiction, back in the 50s, a writer by the name of Tom Godwin wrote a short story called Cold Equations. Now, this was original for its time because it took basically the theme of it was science and math are hard. They can't be changed. They can't be changed. Just because a human wants to change it, you can't change it. It's a brilliant story. If you get a chance to read it, read it. But it's startlingly human in its look at how, no matter what we want as a human, science and math will always win when push comes to shove. It's a brilliant story. It was a groundbreaking story in science fiction because before then, science fiction always had happy endings and la 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 this, and the good guys always won over the bad guys, and science always helped. Science always helped. Well, there are stories about Tom Godwin and Campbell, the editor, going back and forth, and Godwin kept trying to put a happy ending on it, and he couldn't come up with one. He kept trying and trying, and Campbell wanted him to put a happy ending on it, and finally they just went with the true story, and it became a classic that's been remade and remade, and everything else. So if you get a chance, read Cold Equations. It's a short story. It's very short. But in science fiction, what occurred was this saying by the editors, "That's been done." Well, it's been taken to a level of ludicrous. I mean, just ludicrous. One author was talking to an editor, and I was sitting in a bar, and listening to the conversation, and they were talking back and forth, and the editor actually had the audacity to tell this writer about, they were talking about a book thing that the writer was working on, and the editor said, "Oh, James Blish did that in 1957, so it's already been done." Just almost came out of my chair. I tore the editor a new asshole, and just said, "Are you kidding me? Are you telling me that in the year 2000 and whatever it was, that we can't do anything just because it was done in 1957? Oh my God, I just tore him apart. Well, that's the way science fiction in its core and its shrinking core of literary have thought for a long time. The reality is the science fiction world is a gigantic area of games and movies and all of that stuff. It's the largest genre there is, period, because of all of the other stuff. But if it's only in books, it's a tiny little thing. And a lot of it is the fault of the editors. Oh my heavens, the old guard editors. And so, if you hear this in science fiction, or if you've got this in your head in science fiction, stop now. Go to your library, go to your used bookstore, go on Amazon, and find a whole bunch of classic old science fiction. Read them. Then write that story yourself. It will be original because it'll come from you. Don't copy the plot, don't copy anything else. Just take the idea and say, "God, that was a cool idea that James Blish had in his Cities in Flight. That's a really cool idea." Well, luckily the people at Stargate didn't have any worry about this. They just took the whole thing. Atlantis, the entire series of Atlantis, is cities in flight. Atlantis can travel between galaxies, for heaven's sakes, and the whole city lifts off in its dome, and it's just cooler than all get out. They just took James Blish's cities in flight idea and said, "Oh, let's modernize this and make it ours." Okay? If you don't understand how this can be, you need to learn copyright. Oh, my heavens. What's protected in copyright are your words and your form of your words. That's what copyright protects. It does not protect the idea of a city in flight. It does not protect that. If you copied James Blish's words, yes, you'd be infringing copyright. But if you just take the idea, cities in flight, that's public domain. Of course it is. Why? Because all ideas are public domain. They've all been done. They're all in the public domain. Every one of them are in the public domain. Heavens, Rowling, in her British school, do you know how many centuries, before that there were fantasy British schools? Oh, she just took a really, really, really old idea and made it hers. She took Dixonian language and made it hers, and the naming and all the other stuff she did. And then she made it original because she's original. But she was just taking from the past and making this really cool new thing. There isn't an original thing in Star Wars. Besides the fact that Lucas did it and put it all together in an original way. I mean, I just did an introduction for a L. Ron Hubbard book called Kingslayer. Right in the middle of Kingslayer is this incredible scene where Kit, the main person in Kingslayer, goes into a bar to hire a ship to get him off the planet. And Kit is exactly like Han Solo, and the bar is exactly like that scene in Star Wars, and it's, that's so popular. Again, there's nothing copywriting about writing about in a bar. You can't copyright the fact that, there's aliens in a bar. You can't copyright the fact that there's a young guy that needs to find a way off the planet. That's not copyrightable. You can't, Lucas didn't copy Hubbard's language. He just liked the scene and went, that would be cool in my movie, and did it his way and made it original. And it's one of the most famous scenes in movies, in science fiction. That's the key. You can't go back and do this. For heaven's sakes, if you were worried about doing an original plot in romance, what's the plot of every romance? Girl meets a guy. They have all kinds of problems. They solve the problems, and they live happily ever after. What makes anything original is your take at it. Your take at it. And if you do not understand why ideas cannot be copywritten, go buy a copy of the Copyright Handbook and read it. Somewhere about page 86 or 96 or 186 in there, there's an entire thing about running through a mystery novel and how a detective can't be copyrighted. It's New York City. Just because you wrote a book in New York City, nobody else can write a book in New York City? Of course not. So you have to free your mind up from all this worry and all of this being afraid, and learn that sometimes the best ideas are just old ideas that you put a new spin on.